Hi, welcome to the workshop.
Hi.
Now today is the day we're actually going to strip down this chassis into its bare bones. Right, well today we're going to continue dismantling our Range Rover. Having removed the body, we can now turn our attention to just stripping down that chassis, just get rid of absolutely everything. Now we've always said that it's in quite good nick. It's just covered in loads of surface rust and loads of mud and sand and grit, all that stuff that John's been throwing up when he's been driving around off-road. Now you can see even my lovely refurbished fuel tank got sullied when we took off the body, so that's all going to come off eventually, but we need to clean it first. Pretty much everywhere you look there are clumps of mud and dirt that's kind of accumulated over time. There is so much stuff attached to this chassis that just shouldn't be there.
And there's even part of the body still attached here, so I don't know what we're going to do with that.
No, absolutely, and to get that off, it's going to be much easier to see what we've got to play with once the whole chassis is clean. But you can see, again, when all the oil has been leaking out of the transmission, it's kind of congealed with all the mud and made this kind of horrible black concrete we're going to have to sort of chisel off with a jet washer. And then on the back, or the top of the bell housing here, you can see, again, all the oil's been leaking out of the engine, and it's covered. I couldn't get to that when I was steam cleaning the underside of the Range Rover, so all that's going to be very satisfying to get rid of that. Now, perhaps the hardest thing we're going to tackle today is hoiking out the engine and the transmission, because let's face it, everything else is just going to drop off. Paul, what are you doing?
I'm just covering up all the orifices.
Nice thought. Okay, of course. And then when it comes to actually cleaning this thing, we're going to need a bit more extra help on here, aren't we?
We are, I think, maybe some degreaser, and then I think we leave it on there for maybe 10-15 minutes. A little bit of agitation, what do you reckon?
Nice.
And then we give it a jet wash.
Yes, but not on this workshop floor, so let's get it out of the workshop.
Let's do it.
Should we do this? Nice.
My first shiny bit. Look at that. Should we call it a night?
Well, I certainly can't see any more dirt. While that chassis is drip drying in the yard, we need to dispose of a body.
Shall I go and get some shovels?
No, I think we'll use chassis jig.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah. Okay, now, hang on. Let's not spill the tea. Quite important. In fact, we're going to have to put them somewhere else. Oh, there we go, a bit more. Ease this into position. I guess it's what, a bit more?
Yeah.
Right, now, so the only thing that's holding this thing up at the moment are John's little rock sliders, or whatever he wants to call them. So obviously we need to sort of use some metal to hold those in position. And of course this end is heavier than that end, right? Sorry.
Definitely, yeah.
Let's swap
So,
poles.
hang on. Yeah, this one's a lot thicker gauge.
Yeah.
So you take that one there. I'll take that one.
So pop it over the top, because otherwise we're not going to get it out. Or up. So, theoretically, now, when we lower this down, the weight will be supported on these little chaps, and then our body will be levitating, or at least sitting on the chassis jig.
That's the plan.
What are our chances?
No, it's good.
All right, cool, let's give it a go.
Down we go.
Slightly intrigued by the fact we're going to have to find a way of getting this onto a spit.
Yeah, I'm not too sure how we're going to do that. I think the old-fashioned way is probably a mattress, and then we roll it onto a mattress. Because obviously, I don't think we've got to worry too much about damaging any bodywork.
We can't do that. I still think the door hinges might be clever.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. Looking at the bottom of these two A-pillars, I don't think that's a good idea.
Maybe. Right, now, how we...
All right, hang on a sec. Let's just have a little shifty.
Mine could go back a little tiny bit, I think.
I'm okay here.
Not looking terrible.
No, that's looking pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
You happy with that?
Yeah.
Do worry. Right, so if we've successfully separated the body from the ramp, we can now think about starting to roll it, I guess.
I think just before we do that, I just want to get a couple of G-clamps and just secure that box section to the chassis jig.
Good thinking. Okay, so...
Are you ready?
Yeah. Now, actually, what I want to do, I just want to stop when we get... Hang on.
Okay.
I'm just going to lift it up over the...
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I don't want the ramp, I don't want that little bump, because obviously it's not designed for off-road, this thing. Even if the Range Rover is. Right, try that. I'm not sure it's going to work. Nearly. Okay,
yeah.
hopefully that'll be enough.
You're clear.
So we could keep going, couldn't we? Just get a bit more, it doesn't have to go over at all. So keep pushing. It's not going to go, is it? All right, hang on.
Woohoo! There we go.
Okay.
Right, forward.
Okay, ready?
Yep.
All right, and swing it around. Lovely. Oh, look at that. And then backwards. Oh, there we go. Well, that is the body safely buried away. So now we can crack on with the chassis.
Let's get it on the ramp.
We should definitely power these things.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Right. So, I think for now, we'll just lift it on the same kind of positions we have been doing as before. Just a little bit easier. just a nice bit of flat would be
Yeah,
good.
perfect.
Okay, here we go. Oh, hang on. Slightly squiffy.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Right then, after all that huffing and puffing, we've now got our chassis on the ramp, so we're ready to take it apart. Now the first thing we're going to do is try and remove the engine. I think probably the best thing to do, Paul, is probably just lift it right up and actually undo everything from underneath. So things like the starter motor, the engine mounts, obviously all the torque converter bolts. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to undo, isn't there?
There is. I think before we do that, why don't we get some penetrating fluid and just go around and spray everything?
That is a good plan. Okay. Good idea, sir. Go for it. Right, let's get busy.
Wow, have you seen this pinion? Look how much play's in it.
That is a little terrifying. Actually, it's quite a good time to do that. So clearly we are going to have to rebuild the rear diff. I suspect the front might be just as bad, but that's quite a pretty bad indication.
That's pretty bad. I haven't seen one like that before, I must admit.
It's all that rock crawling again. All right, another job for the list.
Let's crack on.
Well, that chassis strip down is coming along nicely, but it's always nice to have a nice cup of tea as well. So thank you as always for watching, and thank you for putting in all your questions and comments. It is rather wonderful to read through them, and so do keep them coming, please. Also, do remember to click subscribe to make sure that YouTube know that you love the show, and also click the bell so you get notifications when we get around to sending them out. Now, I've got a question here from a Johnny Bravo 1. Is that a statue of Gort back there? And by back there, he means the fabrication or the forge area of the workshop, or in fact, actually, our little statue's been creeping around the workshop all over the place. So you may have seen him in all kinds of different bits in the back of shot. And by Gort, he means the big killer robot from the movie The Day the Earth Stood Still. I'm quite glad that it isn't that particular character because he does have a bit of a killer stare. The statue is in fact called Metal Mickey, and it was built by our welding partners BOC back in 1987 for a trade show. Now Mickey is actually modelled on one of BOC's very own welding experts, a guy called Melvin McCune. And so he's just a little bit shorter than myself, even though he's actually standing on a big plinth. So overall he's about 2 meters tall. Now the statue was actually made out of the 4 most commonly welded metals at the time. So you have carbon steel, stainless steel, aluminium and copper, but they're all welded together, which is obviously quite a feat. And it was used to actually advertise the shielding gases that BOC had for sale at the time for both MiG and TIG. So there you go. But in fact, actually you can get some more information if you look at the link in the description. But it isn't Gort, it is Metal Mickey. So we've got a question here from Old Twit Talks Cars. He says, interesting to hear that your AC friend is going to destroy the old gas. Can you destroy gas? And we've got a similar question here from Phil Towell. How do they destroy old refrigerant? Well, obviously, as we discussed the other day, obviously R12 is now obsolete, and therefore any stuff that's left does need to be destroyed properly. And there's actually very few places around the world that can actually do that correctly, so obviously you have to make sure that your refrigerant engineer kind of knows where to send it to and how to get it processed. Now all of those refrigerants and fluorinated gases that need to be destroyed can be, but you have to use extreme heat in a special furnace that burns at about 1300 degrees centigrade. Now it's a special steam plasma furnace, and what it does is actually breaks down those complicated chemicals into carbon dioxide and into water, in fact steam. Now as part of the steam plasma hydrolysis process, basically these gases are broken down, but some little sort of acidic gases are formed. They're quite nasty and they have to be scrubbed clean with a special process to do with the exhaust gases that are coming out. But eventually you end up with 99.99999% worth of clean stuff. Only a little tiny bit is escaping into the atmosphere. So it's a very, very clean process and good for the environment. So there we go. I'm sure you're glad you asked.
Well, that sounded interesting.
That's cheeky. Thank you. Well, I've got another question here that you can actually help answer.
Well, I'll do my best.
So this question is from Pervariant. And he says, are cars like this, meaning the Range Rover, set up with metric or imperial bolts and fasteners? Well, obviously that's weird about this particular Range Rover is that, as Adam confirmed the other day, it's mostly metric, right? The whole car is supposed to be metric.
Yep.
But weirdly, the engine is imperial.
Well, yeah, I think the engine, Rover originally took the engine over in 1965.
Right,
because prior to that it was based on a Buick engine, cast iron block.
Yeah.
Rover got it, aluminium block, cast iron liners. So
So they actually changed it from cast iron to aluminium and
Yes,
still
they did.
didn't bother to change the threads.
Well, no, because it was 1965, pre-decimalisation, so they didn't really need to. We were still, in 1965, we were an imperial kind of country, weren't we?
Even though we invented metric, but that's a whole other story.
Yeah, but
That's
that was in the 70s that we then...
But that thing is, that engine was designed in the 50s. So it was on their drawing boards in the 50s.
Exactly.
It was like I guess it was at 60 or 61, I think, when it came out in America, and then obviously they got rubbish.
Yeah, so even in America now, they're still using imperial as a unit.
Yeah, of course, that makes sense. But that's interesting though, that the fact that the car, because even the gearbox is actually metric.
Yeah, so the gearbox is metric, and all the bolts on the gearbox are metric. But obviously the engine, say we started using it in 1965, they'd have to change all the casting.
It's been a surprisingly short amount of time since I last had to work on my Range Rover. I'm pretty sure my modern one is all metric.
Yeah, I think your modern one would be metric. But I think going back to our Land Rover, I think when BMW took over Jaguar Land Rover...
P38, wasn't it, I think?
Yes, it was a P38. But the Rover V8 was still there. I think they put their German input into it, and I think we had imperial bolts with metric heads, if I remember rightfully.
Gosh, so the Germans metrificated our imperial
because it was cheap. It may be cheaper to make new bolts. Oh my word. So imperial bolts with metric heads than actually redo all the castings and re-tap and dye everything. Wow. So
well, there we go. So that's why it's so confusing when you're working on a Range Rover. But essentially, the hammer will always solve it. So that's good.
So bit of useless information there for you.
Yeah, with the Brummie screwdriver, of course, you should say the hammer. Right. So then that's a great answer. Thank you, sir. So the next question we've got here. Oh, actually, no, we've got top tip of the week. We nearly forgot.
Okay.
So top tip of the week this week is from Ken Kennedy. Thank you, Ken. And he says, do all your viewers a favour and tell them to use JIS, or Japanese Industrial Standard screwdrivers, only on these little wee bikes, meaning the monkey bike we were playing around with the other day, or the monkey bikey likey, because it's not a real one. Otherwise, the chocolate screws will come out and create hell. Happy days. There we go. Well, yes, it's a good point, isn't it? So basically, the Japanese, just like everyone else, you've got Phillips, you've got Posi Drive, and you've got the JIS. And obviously, the I think I've forgotten which way around it is. It's either slightly more pointy, slightly less pointy, but if you try and use a Phillips, like we might have done, actually that's going to end up ruining that screw, isn't it?
That's
you know how you can tell?
I haven't got a clue.
There's a little tiny dot just in the little cross.
Oh, okay.
So on a proper screw, you'll see a little tiny dot, and then you know for sure. Then you know to use the right screwdriver.
What a good idea.
There we go. Well, thank you. Thank you, Ken. That's a fantastic top tip. We should crack on with that chassis.
Let's do it.
Go on then. Right then, so we need to start taking some things apart. We'll start with some big lumps, obviously the engine and the gearbox when I come out, but I think it is going to be easier if we separate them, isn't it, really?
Yeah, definitely, because we're going to build the engine and then obviously we need to sort the issues out in the gearbox. I think having two kind of lumps rather than one big one is going to be a lot easier. And it's also going to be a lot easier to disconnect the torque converter and everything else in this position.
Because that is the thing, we've got a lot of fluidy stuff to worry about. So even though we've disconnected these transcooler pipes from the transcooler itself, so the transmission cooler, basically they are still attached to the engine in a couple of places, and obviously they can easily get damaged, then there'll be fluid leaking all over the place. So I think we'll actually disconnect those and remove them all the way from the assembly so they're just not in the way. But then talking of further fluid, as Paul suggests, obviously we've got our torque converter in here, we know about that, we've actually got that attached to the flex plate, which of course is bolted to the engine. And so rather than chuck fluid all over the place from that as well, and also risking damaging the seals on the torque converter, at least on the gearbox, then what we want to do then is actually disconnect it from the flex plate. So we'll open this little hole here again. That is where our biscuit of unpleasantness was before. And also we'll probably take off this front plate as well, give us a bit more access, and then we can unbolt the torque converter from the flex plate. Then we can push that torque converter into the bell housing. That's going to give us a bit more safety, a bit more space, which would be nice. So that'll be one less thing to leak all over the floor. But then also talking about fluid still, we've then got the power steering fluid as well, haven't we?
Yes, we have.
So I guess we could
and then we need to sort the exhaust out as well.
Yeah, well, the exhaust is another thing, because we have, obviously here, we've got our sort of cast collectors going into these sort of secondaries here, this 2-into-1 pipe that then goes off into the rest of the rusty old exhaust system. So we are going to upgrade these into some kind of tubular headers at some point to give it a bit more sportiness, and it's going to sound better as well, of course, it's going to perform better. So really, these are scrap. And also, you imagine if we leave them attached here, they're actually going to make it harder to get past the gearbox when we take the engine out. So we might actually either unbolt them, because there are sort of 3 bolts on the top there onto that manifold, but of course they're notoriously rusty, notoriously difficult to disconnect. So we might end up cutting the exhaust just to give ourselves a bit more space. So I think, shall we start with the torque converter?
Sounds like a plan.
Cool. Well, that is for that little centre plate.
Thank you.
Oh, now, do you think we're going to get that off without moving the sump out of the way? Go. Oh, and a bit of gasket. So with the cover now out of the way, we can see a whole load of bolt heads, but actually it's not those that we're looking for. The ones we want are just up there through the little holes in the flex plate, and I can feel, well, I guess it must be probably a 17 mil head there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to try and crank around the engine. So pop that in the end, and then try and get it into a good position. Nice and easy, right, so, there we go, right, so now I've got a hole pretty much at an edge, so if we now get this through, do you reckon that's going to work?
Yeah, I think it should.
A tiny bit more.
Yeah, you're on it.
That's good, so now what we need to do is I need another thing.
Stop the engine rotating.
Get a pry bar, and then I'm just going to whiz this up there, like that. Should be able to do this. Oh, there we go. Not quite sure how they put this together, but probably not like this. All right, there we go. Oh,
there we go.
Nice, there we go. Nice and easy. Kind of. Oh, so hopefully. There we have it. Oh. Okay, hopefully one more to go. Yeah, theoretically there should only be 3, but let's see how we go. Yeah, so those bolts are basically just holding that ring gear for the starter onto the flex plate, aren't they? You think they'd normally weld it, wouldn't you?
They normally are welded.
Okay, so I think that is the last bolt. So the next thing is we're just going to push that torque converter, make sure it goes all the way into the bell housing towards the gearbox. I should do that. And I'll just try and pull this away from the flex plate into the gearbox. Oh yes. With that done, I start to remove the pipes that carry the transmission fluid from the gearbox to the cooler positioned at the front of the vehicle. While Paul gets on with separating the exhaust system from the cast iron manifold. Oh dear, there seems to be some of that chocolate sauce still in the gearbox. this should now be, just wiggle them through. Right, so that is the transmission cooling pipes out of the way. So the last thing underneath, I think, are the engine mounts. Right, we're making quite good progress here. So the next stage, now everything underneath has been undone. We've still got to disconnect the power steering, and we've got to disconnect the bell housing of the gearbox from the engine. There's a load of bolts that go from this side all the way around to the other side. There's an earth strap, a couple of other little bits and pieces, and then we're hopefully going to be good to actually lift it out of the chassis. So it's getting quite good.
So I've just got the high pressure and the return to the pump here. I'm just going to disconnect those, but I'm going to put a tray under there first because I'm sure there's going to be some fluid.
Good thinking. Cool.
That's going to come out.
Just undoing that one a little bit, but I'm going to leave it bolted up for now. So I think this is it. This is the last one. Right, so that now is the last bolt. So the next thing we're going to do is actually try and lift the engine, start to pull it away, separate it from the gearbox. But before we do, with that last bolt still attached, we're just going to take the strain, get a little wedge, a bit of wood underneath, well, the gearbox basically, between that and the cross member. And that way it's just going to give it a little extra bit of support, and then we should be able to more easily pull the engine away from the gearbox. Right then, Paul, let's get our engine crane in. Just drop it down a bit. Okay, so now, thankfully, the way this engine is put together, it actually comes with two little engine or lifting eyes, which is great. What are you doing?
I'm on.
So, makes it a lot easier to get out. I guess they expect people to be working on them all the time. Right, so now I'm just going to take the strain, just going to lift it up.
Oh.
Enough. And now we're just going to pop that little bit of wood or something underneath. What do you reckon? How about that big?
Oh, perfect.
So just drop it down again just to get it in position. So we could do the honours with the last bolt. Now it's going to take a little bit of wiggling, but we should now be able to wrestle the engine from the transmission. So I might drop it down a tiny bit as well. Okay.
I think you need to go up.
Actually, no, we are going to have to go a bit.
Yeah, go up.
So we might need a bigger bit of wood. Actually.
Ready?
Yeah. Bit more. Okay. Right, I'm just going to wind this back a little bit first, just so we've got a little bit more weight supported at this end. Right. Should we wiggle? There we go. Oh, awesome. So now, how are we doing? So it's kind of levitating, which is good.
Yeah.
So now if we just pump it up.
Up we go. Oh. Bit more.
No, that was it.
Okay, pull it back.
We drop it down a bit. Okay. Looking quite reasonable. Have a filter. Nice.
Yeah, I'll lift it and get past there.
Yeah. I'll just give it a little bit more height. We're kind of at the end of the engine hoist, but that's enough, hopefully. Whew. Well, look at that.
Wow.
Our V8 has been separated from the chassis. I think we've done very well, so that's very good. So now that's done, all we've got to do is the gearbox and transmission, the exhaust system, the suspension, all those fiddly little brackets that are going to be a real pain to get off, but they have to come off. And all of that, I think, is a job for another day. See you later.